The San Francisco 49ers are making noise, and not just a little bit of noise. We are talking about a running back battle that nobody saw coming, an offensive lineman flipping the entire depth chart on its head, and a defensive weapon that the whole NFL might be criminally sleeping on. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, we need to have the conversation about which team is realistically going to dethrone the reigning kings of the NFL. Buckle up, because this one is absolutely loaded. If you are new here and you love deep, passionate 49ers breakdowns like this one, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because we do this every single day and we are just getting started. Let's open up with something that genuinely made my jaw drop, because this one came out of nowhere. We are talking about the running back depth chart, and specifically, a young player who has apparently walked into OTAs and started making the kind of statement that turns heads and raises eyebrows across an entire organization. His name is Kalon Black. Now look, before anybody jumps in the comments telling me it's only OTAs, I already hear you. We all know the deal with OTAs. There are no pads. Nobody is getting hit. Players are running on air, catching on air, and the physicality that defines real football simply isn't there yet. I know that. You know that. Every single 49ers fan with a pulse knows that. But here's what we also know. Movement tells a story even before the pads come on. The direction a player is trending, the way his body moves through drills, the instincts that show up before contact even becomes a factor, that stuff is real. And what we are being told about Kalon Black right now is real enough to get very, very excited about. According to a trusted, highly plugged-in voice in the 49ers media world, Kalon Black already looks like the number 2 running back on this team. Not a guy fighting for a roster spot. Not a depth piece just trying to survive. The number TWO back. Behind only Christian McCaffrey, one of the greatest dual-threat running backs in the modern history of this sport. That is not a small statement. That is a massive, heavyweight declaration that deserves our full attention. So here's how the running back room is currently shaping up if you want to look at it from a power rankings perspective. And power rankings are honestly the most honest and fair way to evaluate these things because they are simply a reflection of what we know right now in this moment. Christian McCaffrey sitting at the top, obviously, as he always will when healthy. Kalon Black at number 2. Jordan James at number 3. Patrick Taylor Jr. at number 4. And Isaac Guerendo currently dealing with an injury situation. Here's where it gets interesting though, and this is the part one want to talk about for a second. There's a historical pattern with this franchise that we absolutely cannot ignore. Before Christian McCaffrey arrived and changed everything, the most successful running backs this 49ers team had were guys named Matt Breida, Jeff Wilson, and Raheem Mostert. You know what all 3 of those names have in common. They were all undrafted free agents. Not first-round picks. Not highly touted prospects. Undrafted. And Mostert in particular. The man was on 6 different NFL teams before he ever put on a 49ers jersey. 6 teams. Think about how extraordinary that is. 6 franchises looked at Raheem Mostert and moved on, and then this team gave him a chance and he turned into one of the most electric backs in the entire league. That history matters. That context is everything when you're evaluating a player like Kalon Black who wasn't drafted in the top rounds and isn't surrounded by the biggest hype machine. And speaking of Jordan James, I want to say something here because I feel like he's been getting lost in the shuffle of this whole conversation. We have seen absolutely nothing to suggest that any final decision on this running back hierarchy is going to be made before training camp. Nothing. So why are we ready to bury Jordan James? Why are people so quick to move on from a guy who hasn't even had a real chance to prove himself under live conditions yet? I'm not ready to do that. He was drafted for a reason. He has real talent. And until somebody lines up against him in pads and takes him out of the competition, he deserves to be treated like a legitimate factor in this offense. Let's keep it real though. Here's my question for you. With Kalon Black suddenly emerging as a potential breakout star and Jordan James still very much in the mix, which of these 2 running backs do you think will have the bigger impact for the 49ers this upcoming season? Think on that, because we are about to see a fascinating competition play out. Now let's shift gears to the offensive line, because this is the second piece of wild news and honestly it might be the most surprising development of everything we are discussing today. Heading into this off-season, the conversation around the left guard competition was pretty straightforward. The expectation, based on early reporting and conventional wisdom, was that Carver Willis, a recently drafted interior lineman, would be the front-runner to lock down that starting spot. People were relatively settled on that idea. There wasn't a ton of drama around it. And then Connor Kobe happened. The same plugged-in voice that gave us the Kalon Black update has now essentially walked back his original position on Carver Willis being the guy at left guard. Not fully, not with total certainty, but the implication is loud and clear. Connor Kobe has come into this off-season and flat-out impressed people. And when someone who doesn't just throw opinions around loosely starts leaning away from the early favorite, that means something. That is not noise. That is signal. And here is why you should not panic about this. Here is why this is actually a beautiful thing if you love this franchise and you believe in what this coaching staff has built. When a player who is not supposed to win a job walks in and takes it anyway, that is a win. That is the system working exactly as it should. It means a guy came in, outworked the competition, evolved faster than anyone expected, and forced his way into a spot that wasn't reserved for him. That is exactly the kind of culture and depth that championship organizations are built on. If Carver Willis doesn't win the left guard job, his career on this roster is not over. He is a versatile interior lineman who has experience at multiple positions, and depth like that is genuinely valuable on an offensive line that is trying to stay healthy and dominant through a long, grinding NFL season. So nobody should be pressing the panic button. This is healthy competition producing excellent results. And it doesn't stop there. One of the most respected offensive line analysts covering this team recently made a statement that should make every 49ers fan feel incredible about where this unit is heading. He called the 49ers offensive line the deepest it has been since he started closely following this organization. The deepest. And is projecting them as a potential top 10 unit in the entire NFL. That is extraordinary praise. When you think about how much uncertainty was surrounding this group coming out of last season, the injuries, the questions about continuity, the unknowns at certain positions, to now be hearing language like deepest and top 10, that is a dramatic, remarkable turnaround. Connor Kobe specifically is being described as playing noticeably faster. His football IQ has clearly grown. His first full off-season as an NFL player has turned him into a different player than the raw, developmental prospect who arrived. This is what player development looks like when it actually works. And we are going to learn so much more about this offensive line when joint practices against the Chargers and Titans give us real competitive representatives to evaluate. Now let's talk about a player who I believe is going to have a massive, massive impact on this defense this season, and who, in my opinion, is being almost criminally underappreciated on a national level. Osa Odighizuwa. A recent report detailed observations from the defensive line in practice, and what was said about Odighizuwa jumped off the page immediately. From a pure physical standpoint, his size and frame stand out in a way that commands attention when you see him next to his peers. But more than the physical gifts, which are genuinely impressive, what is being observed is the leadership. He is the guy leading the defensive line group through drills. He is first through every rep. His body language communicates a level of ownership and accountability that goes beyond just being another addition to the roster. He has walked into this building and taken responsibility in a way that tells you he understands exactly what kind of organization he has joined. And this is why the national media conversation around him frustrates me, because if Odighizuwa were a 20-sack per season edge rusher, someone racking up the kind of gaudy statistics that get plastered on highlight reels and talked about on every major sports television program, he would be one of the most talked about defensive players in the entire league. But he is a pressure specialist. He disrupts quarterbacks, he collapses pockets, he creates havoc in ways that the traditional stat sheet doesn't always fully capture. And the mainstream media has never figured out how to properly value that skill set. Pressures matter. Pocket disruption matters. The quarterback who is running for his life, who is slightly off his timing, who cannot step into his throws, that quarterback is losing games because of players like Osa Odighizuwa. And he deserves every bit of recognition that goes with that. This is your question of the day, and I genuinely want to hear from you in the comments below. Do you think Osa Odighizuwa is going to be the most underrated player on this 49ers roster in 2025? Make your voice heard. Before we get into the final section of today's breakdown, there is one more piece of news from practice that deserves to be addressed. The punt return competition is underway, and the names getting representatives right now include Jacob Cowing, Ricky Perrell, Christian Kirk, and Will Pauling. The notable absence from that list is Junior Bergen, who did not practice but was spotted on the sideline getting work in on the side. The exact nature of his absence hasn't been fully clarified yet, but the important thing to keep in mind is that we are in OTAs. There is time. Bergen has proven what he can do in that return role, and as long as he gets healthy before training camp, the competition will be wide open. What is worth getting excited about right now is Jacob Cowing. He has been one of the standout performers at OTAs in terms of overall impact, and adding the punt return responsibility to his profile only strengthens what was already a compelling case for a roster spot. In a league where special teams value can be the difference between making a 53-man roster and getting cut, Cowing putting himself in the conversation as a returner is a significant development. And now we get to the big picture conversation, the one that every single 49ers fan has had at least 50 times in the last 12 months. Which team is going to dethrone the Seattle Seahawks? Last season, the Seahawks established themselves as the class of the NFC. They were dominant, well-coached, and frankly a level above what most of the conference could throw at them. And since then, the question has become the defining storyline for almost every team in the NFC, not just the 49ers. NFL.com recently published a piece highlighting 8 teams with a legitimate shot to knock them off their throne, and the list is fascinating. The 8 teams identified were the Los Angeles Rams, the San Francisco 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Detroit Lions, the Denver Broncos, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Buffalo Bills, and the Baltimore Ravens. The 49ers were placed 5th in the original ranking. I think that is too low. Significantly too low. And here is exactly why. First, let's talk about the team that almost certainly has to be ranked number 1 right now. And I say this through gritted teeth as a lifelong 49er supporter. The Los Angeles Rams. And before anybody clicks away in disgust, just hear me out, because this is about being honest with ourselves. The Rams, last season, demonstrated more than any other team in the NFC that they could go toe-to-toe with the Seahawks consistently. Not once. Not in a single fluke performance. Consistently. Multiple times. They showed they could match that defense, compete through 4 quarters, and do it without wilting under pressure. That is a fact that cannot be argued away by team loyalty. Until someone else demonstrates that same ability, the Rams have to sit at the top of this particular list. But right behind them, the San Francisco 49ers. And I am not ranking them second out of favoritism. I am ranking them second because they beat several of the other teams on this list head-to-head last season. They beat the Eagles. They beat teams that other people want to place above them in this conversation. And the moves they made this off-season, specifically on both sides of the trenches, represent a deliberate, targeted evolution aimed directly at fixing what kept them from getting over the top. Now here is where this gets complicated and genuinely interesting. Teams like the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens, on pure paper talent, might have the most impressive rosters of any team in professional football. Josh Allen is a freak of nature. Lamar Jackson is a legitimate MVP candidate every single season. The weapons surrounding both of them are elite. And yet, and this is the brutal, uncomfortable truth, neither franchise has been able to close the deal on the biggest stage when everything was on the line. Year after year, those rosters look like Super Bowl rosters. And year after year, we are watching someone else hoist the Lombardi Trophy. Until I see it happen, until I see either of those organizations actually win the thing, I cannot in good conscience rank them ahead of teams that have at least demonstrated a track record of winning in January and February. The Denver Broncos represent a fascinating wild card in this conversation. Bo Nix is unproven at the highest level of playoff football. There are real questions about whether he is the kind of quarterback who elevates when the moment gets impossibly large. But what Denver does have is an organizational infrastructure that knows how to win. Their head coach has been on the sideline for Super Bowl victories. That experience, that institutional knowledge of what championship football looks like from the inside, that is not something you can manufacture. It is real. And it gives them a credibility that some of the other teams on this list simply do not have. The Kansas City Chiefs. Look, I understand the skepticism. The window is narrowing. Patrick Mahomes is not operating at the superhuman level that once made him essentially untouchable. The supporting cast has questions. And yet, and I hate saying this as much as you hate reading it, you do not simply dismiss a franchise that has found a way to win multiple Super Bowls in the last several years. They know how to win. They know what it takes. They have the personnel in place to at least make it uncomfortable for anybody they face in the postseason. Dismissing them entirely would be the kind of overconfidence that gets fans burned every single year. The Philadelphia Eagles are a fascinating case. They have the roster. They have the coaching. They were in the Super Bowl conversation just last season. But the 49ers beat the Eagles. That matters. Head-to-head, when it counted, San Francisco showed they were the better team. So how do you rank the Eagles above the 49ers in a conversation like this? The answer is you don't. You can't. The Lions are a team I genuinely love watching. Dan Campbell is one of the best coaches in the league. Jared Goff has transformed himself into a legitimate, reliable, high-level quarterback. But the Lions, for all their talent and all their entertainment value, have not gotten the job done in January. They have come close. They have broken hearts in the most devastating possible ways. And until they break through that ceiling, they belong at the bottom of a list like this despite having a roster that would embarrass most franchises. Here is my final ranking then, and I want to hear your pushback in the comments. Rams at the top, 49ers at number 2, and I genuinely like San Francisco's chances over everyone else on this entire list to be the team standing in Seattle's way in the NFC Championship game. Broncos at 3 for organizational credibility. Eagles at 4. Chiefs at 5. Bills at 6. Ravens at 7. Lions at 8. The 49ers have the talent. They have the coaching. They have the history of competing at the highest level in this league for the last half-decade. And this offseason, they have clearly made the kind of targeted, intelligent moves that suggest the front office believes the window is not just open, it is wide open. The Seahawks are not invincible. They are beatable. And the team most likely to prove that, most likely to walk into that stadium and do what needs to be done to claim the NFC throne, is wearing red and gold. The 49ers are coming. And honestly, the rest of the NFC should be very, very nervous.